Don't stand around doing nothing. People will think you're the boss. Hi, I'm Denise Spann, and this is how I viewed leadership before I started down the path of becoming a leader. Before starting down this path, I had owned an apartment complex and held several mid to low level management positions. I also had several hourly wage entry-level jobs. My understanding and views regarding leadership were varied and unfocused, as if I was wandering in the wilderness. I believed that the leader-follower relationship was an us versus them paradigm. Regardless of which role I was in, be it leader or follower, I always saw the other side as the opposition. As an hourly employee, I viewed management as the oppressor, and as a manager, I viewed the hourly employees as a burden. And then I found a path. This path was the organizational leadership program at Texas A&M Commerce. This path began with the study of issues a leader faces within an organization, and there are very many. But the issue that stood out the most to me was communication. Because of my previous experiences, lack of communication led to the us versus them mentality. What I learned is that by opening the channels of communication between leaders and followers, you can begin to create a culture that is no longer us versus them, but is now we. Open lines of communication can achieve this because followers no longer feel like they're in the dark, and management now sees followers as valuable assets. Good communication allows followers to understand not only the what, but the why regarding organizational decisions. And leaders begin to see the value of input from followers. Speaking of culture, that is another major issue that I believe leaders face. While walking my path, I came to understand that every organization has its own unique culture. As a leader, you must identify the positive aspects of an organizational culture and nurture them. You must also identify the negative aspects and change them. You can do this through the use of power. You can use reward power to encourage good cultural behavior, like being helpful to other employees. You can use coercive power to deter bad cultural behavior, like gossiping. But the best use of power to affect an organization's culture is referent power. Leading by example, being authentic and approachable, having good communication skills, and getting in the trenches with your followers are all examples of how you can use referent power to affect the culture of an organization. Another issue that my path led me through was negotiations. This is another example of how walking this path changed my perception from an us versus them to a we. I always thought that in a negotiation there was always a winner and always a loser. But what I learned is that negotiating is less about winning and more about finding common ground. One of the first steps of doing this is having a clear understanding of what the other side wants and working to create a situation where they can get what they want without compromise what it is that you want. The next turn in my path led me to the study of data-driven decision making. And for the purpose of this tongue twister title, I'm just going to call it DDDM. I found the concept of making decisions based on measured data fascinating, and I've already started using it in my current leadership role. One of the reasons I found it so fascinating is that I came to understand that all decisions not based on measurable data are subjective, and the only way to make an objective decision is to measure it and analyze the data from these measurements. That doesn't mean that every single decision a leader makes requires data. As a matter of fact, most decisions a leader makes will not be backed up by data. Because a leader makes hundreds of decisions every day, it's not realistic to be able to make a DDDM on each one. Most day-to-day decisions can be made on knowledge and experience. But when undertaking new projects, problems, issues, or process change, DDDM can be of great value. Right now, I'm using DDDM to determine how to move my organization from Forbes 4-star rating to Forbes 5-star rating. I'm doing this by implementing a service audit program that includes both self-audits and supervised audits. Each of these audits measures multiple categories of service for each employee. The completed audits are then collected and entered into a matrix that I've created. We are currently in the data collection part of the process, but once we have at least 60 days worth of data, we will be able to determine what areas need improvement for each individual employee as well as each department. We will then make decisions backed up by data on where additional training and coaching is necessary. One of the most winding parts of my path was delving into the subject of ethics. Ethics not only affects your role as a leader, but every aspect of your life. A lot of people think that powerful leaders by nature are unethical or corrupt and use that to explain their success. What I learned was that to truly achieve great leadership requires high ethical standards. That's not to say that all leaders possess that trait, but because of humanity's fascination with the dark side of life, the media only reports on corrupt leaders. The reality is that most leaders would not have achieved their leadership role without high ethical traits. Ethics has a major impact on every single aspect of leadership. Communication is a great leadership tool, but if you're dishonest in your communications, it will take the organizational culture in a negative direction. Even in something as definitive as DDDM, ethics are still in play. Because if the people measuring the data skew it to reach the outcome they desire, then you have brought poor ethics into the process. This will create an inaccurate result. But perhaps to me, the darkest twist of this path was the realization that as a leader, you have to make decisions on the value of human life. This is easy to see in military leadership, where leaders must make decisions to send troops into battle where some will likely lose their life. But it exists in the private sectors as well. We saw this when we studied the case of the Ford Pinto, where executives made decisions on whether to continue making a dangerous product based on the cost of human life. They did this by looking at the number of deaths and what the lawsuits would cost versus the profit they were making on the product. But this is just one example. Every company that makes a product capable of injuring or killing someone must make the same decision. Another obvious example is term life insurance. These organizations literally put a dollar figure on what your life is worth if you die. The reason ethics is so daunting is that if I achieve my goal in becoming a great leader, I may have to make a decision on the value of a human life, and that is life-altering to me. After navigating the many twists and turns of ethics, my path led me to the study of leadership theory. What I found interesting was that while transformational leaders are the rock stars of the leadership world, there are other types of leaderships that have value. Transactional leaders are the least impressive on the surface, but in a well-structured organization with a good culture, a transactional leader can be very effective. The leadership theory that I was drawn to the most was the theory of authentic leadership. I like the idea that being an honest, ethical, open, and approachable leader leads to positive results with your followers. It is my hope that regardless of what leadership I play right now and in the future, I will always be an authentic leader. Everybody wants to be a rock star, and I hope that I will have the opportunity to be a transformational leader while maintaining my authenticity. The reason transformational leaders get the most attention is because change is a very difficult thing to achieve. The next part of my path took me through the rough terrain of change. WebMD identifies changing jobs, marriage, having children, and moving as some of the greatest causes of stress in individuals. All of these involve change. The same is true of change within an organization. This is one of the primary reasons for people's resistance to change. No one wants to be stressed or uncomfortable. One of the best ways to manage change within an organization is by making the change the follower's idea. One of the most effective ways to do this is to identify an area in need of change and then create a team of followers. Task the team with resolving the issue within that area. By doing this, it empowers followers because they are making the change rather than have the change forced upon them. You can further get your followers in the boat with you by allowing them to come up with the idea as well as spearheading the implementation process. The more you involve your followers in the process of change, the less resistance you will face. Along the path of managing change, I created a change management plan. In the last stretch of my path, capstone, I begin the process of implementing this change. This is where I begin to utilize all the tools and knowledge I had acquired in my exploration to this point. What I discovered is that everything I've learned comes into play when you actually begin to change. Because of what I learned about ethics, I have begun to change the culture within my organization by simply refusing to listen to gossip and calling out other people when they exhibit this behavior. And while I've only been doing this for a short period of time, I'm already seeing a positive change in the culture around me. This is a great example of how referent power can be utilized by any person at any level of an organization to lead change. Regardless of what tools and processes you use to manage change, none of them will be effective without the use of good communication. Communication can be the deciding factor in leading change management. As I approach the end of my path through organizational leadership, I see before me hundreds of other paths with many forks and many branches that I feel I am prepared and equipped and confident that I can not only navigate them, but I can choose which ones I want to walk. I will always be grateful to the organization that walked this path with me. Many thanks to Texas A&M University and the professors that have encouraged me and supported me. Thank you.